Americans pour over 60 million cases of bourbon every year, but not every bottle deserves the hype. Today, we're ranking 15 famous bourbon brands from absolute worst to truly exceptional. And trust me, number 1 is going to shock you. Starting at the bottom, we have Early Times. This Kentucky straight bourbon has been around since 1860, but age does not always equal quality. The light amber color promises something approachable, and that is exactly what you get. Too approachable. The flavor profile is thin, with faint notes of caramel and corn that vanish almost immediately. There is a harsh ethanol bite on the finish that no amount of ice can tame. Early Times built its reputation on being cheap and available, which worked great when bourbon meant quantity over character. You will find it in every corner store, priced to move fast. It mixes okay in cocktails where other ingredients can mask its shortcomings, but neater on the rocks, it is a reminder that not all bourbon deserves your attention. It is a functional whiskey for people who do not care what is in their glass. At number 14, we have Old Crow. This brand carries serious historical weight. It was supposedly Abraham Lincoln's favorite bourbon, and legends say it inspired the creation of Jack Daniels. But somewhere between then and now, Old Crow lost its way. The current version tastes like a shadow of what it once was. You get sharp grain alcohol up front, a whisper of vanilla in the middle, and a finish that burns without any of the pleasant warmth good bourbon should deliver. The mash bill is standard, the aging is minimal, and the result is predictable. Old Crow survives on name recognition and rock-bottom pricing. College students buy it for quantity. Dive bars stock it for drinks. But bourbon enthusiasts, they walk right past it. It is not offensive enough to pour down the drain, but it is not good enough to recommend. Old Crow represents bourbon's bottom shelf, where heritage cannot save you from mediocrity. Number 13 brings us Jim Beam White Label. This is bourbon's blue-collar heartbeat, distilled by 7 generations of the Beam family in Kentucky. Jim Beam does not pretend to be fancy. It is designed to be dependable, affordable, and everywhere. The aroma offers vanilla, toasted oak, and a hint of peanut shell. On the palate, you will find mild sweetness and light spice that disappears almost as quickly as it arrives. The finish is short and unremarkable. Beam built an empire not on flavor complexity, but on consistency and identity. It is the bottle for sports nights, backyard cookouts, and first legal shots at 21. Critics dismiss it as flat and one-dimensional. Loyalists defend it as reliable comfort. The truth lives somewhere between. Jim Beam is not trying to impress whiskey snobs or win awards. It is bourbon for people who want to pour without thinking, mix without worry, and move on with their night. 12. Evan Williams Black Label sits quietly on shelves next to flashier bottles, but this bourbon over-delivers for its price point. You get aromas of caramel, oak, and baking spice that suggest something more expensive is in the bottle. The flavor holds longer than you would expect, with genuine bourbon character that does not quit halfway through the sip. There is an honest burn on the finish that reminds you this is real whiskey, not some watered-down imposter. Evan Williams does not ride on celebrity endorsements or fancy marketing campaigns. It wins on merit alone, delivering quality that punches well above its weight class. Bartenders recommend it when customers want something good without the premium price tag. It has become the quiet overachiever of American bourbon, carving out a reputation as the best affordable option you can find. When you are watching your budget but refuse to compromise on taste, this is the bottle that makes sense. It proves you do not need to spend $50 to enjoy real bourbon. At number 11, we find Benchmark. This Buffalo Trace distillery product flies under the radar, despite being made at one of Kentucky's most respected facilities. Benchmark uses the same mash bill as some far more expensive bourbons, which makes its low price almost suspicious. The nose delivers sweet corn, vanilla, and a touch of cinnamon. The taste follows with mild caramel sweetness and light oak before fading into a quick, warm finish. There is nothing complex or challenging here, just straightforward bourbon that does its job without demanding attention. The consistency is surprisingly good for something this cheap. You will not find wild flavor variations between bottles, which matters more than people realize. Benchmark works beautifully in cocktails where you need bourbon character without overpowering other ingredients. It also sips fine on its own if you are not expecting fireworks. This is bourbon for everyday drinking, the kind you keep around for casual evenings when you want something real but not precious. Number 10. Wild Turkey 101 is a bold, high-proof classic. When a bourbon proudly displays its proof on the label, it is making a statement. This is not for tourists or casual sippers. Wild Turkey 101 is bourbon in its purest, most unapologetic American form. Distilled under legendary master distiller Jimmy Russell's watchful eye, this bottle has fueled campfire stories, inspired country songs, and created more memories than anyone will admit. The flavor comes in swinging with cherry and cinnamon up front, rich caramel through the middle, and oak with genuine heat on the finish. Yes, there is bite, but there is also beautiful balance. That is the magic of 101. It punches well above its modest price without ever losing its manners. You can sip it slow and appreciate the complexity, or mix it fast and watch it hold its own against any ingredient. Wild Turkey built its reputation through loyalty, not marketing gimmicks. Old school drinkers love it because it never sold out or went soft. 9. Four Roses. Small batch doesn't chase trends or scream for attention. It defines bourbon quietly, confidently, through craftsmanship that speaks for itself. Long before small batch became overused marketing language, Four Roses was experimenting with 10 distinct bourbon recipes and 2 different mash bills to achieve something special. While other distilleries got louder and flashier, Four Roses simply whispered, and the real bourbon drinkers listened carefully. The flavor tells a genuine love story between spice and sweetness. You will find floral rye notes, warm honey, rich toffee, and a slow-building warmth that ends with a remarkably clean finish. Every sip feels layered and thoughtful without ever becoming heavy or overwhelming. This is bourbon made for contemplation, not Instagram photos. Four Roses built its reputation through word of mouth among people who actually know whiskey. Bartenders trust it completely. Whiskey enthusiasts respect it deeply. It does not rely on celebrity endorsements, heritage storytelling, or artificial scarcity. Just excellent bourbon that proves quality does not need to shout. At number 8, we have Knob Creek. This small batch bourbon emerged from Jim Beam's portfolio as proof that the Beam family could make premium whiskey when they wanted to. Aged 9 years and bottled at a robust 100 proof, Knob Creek delivers the kind of bold, full-flavored bourbon experience that demands your attention. The aroma hits with strong oak, vanilla, and baking spices. The taste follows with rich caramel, roasted nuts, and a long, warming finish that lingers pleasantly. There is complexity here that rewards slow sipping and careful attention. The higher proof means it holds up beautifully with ice or with water without losing character. Knob Creek positioned itself as an accessible premium bourbon, priced higher than standard offerings but still reasonable compared to allocated bottles. It works perfectly for bourbon drinkers who have graduated past entry-level bottles but are not ready to chase rare releases. The consistency remains impressive year after year. You know exactly what you are getting every time you crack a bottle, which builds the kind of trust that keeps customers coming back. Number 7 brings us Elijah Craig Small Batch. This bourbon carries the name of the Baptist minister credited with inventing bourbon itself, though historians debate that claim. What is not debatable is the quality inside these bottles. Elijah Craig delivers rich, complex bourbon character at a price that makes premium bourbon accessible to regular people. The nose offers brown sugar, vanilla, oak, and subtle fruit notes. The palate follows with caramel, baking spices, leather, and toasted wood before finishing with pleasant warmth and lingering sweetness. There is a beautiful balance between the sweetness from the corn and the spice from the rye. The 12-year age statement disappeared recently, but the quality remained remarkably consistent. Elijah Craig works equally well for sipping neat or for building cocktails that need serious bourbon backbone. It has become a bartender favorite and a regular recommendation for people exploring better bourbon without breaking the bank. This bottle represents bourbon's sweet spot where craft meets value. 6. Buffalo Trace. The word allocation has become a trigger in the whiskey world, and Buffalo Trace carries some responsibility for that phenomenon. This once modest Kentucky bourbon has become the bottle everyone chases, not because of trendy marketing, but because it genuinely delivers where it counts. When you finally find one at retail price, it feels like striking gold. That first sip explains everything. Brown sugar and orange peel led into rich caramel, a solid oak presence, and a subtle touch of tobacco. The texture is beautifully creamy, and the finish is long and satisfying. It is not the strongest bourbon available, and it is certainly not the rarest, but it might be the most balanced bourbon in America. There is remarkable harmony here, an elegance that feels timeless rather than trendy. Buffalo Trace grew famous organically through enthusiasts spreading the word. It became the gateway bourbon for collectors, opening doors to Pappy Van Winkle, Eagle Rare, and Blanton's. Despite the hype and occasional scarcity, this remains accessible bourbon at heart. At number 5, we find Angel's Envy. This bourbon breaks tradition by finishing in port wine barrels, which adds a layer of complexity that sets it apart from standard bourbon profiles. Founded by the late Lincoln Henderson, former master distiller at Brown-Forman, Angel's Envy represents what happens when bourbon veterans decide to experiment. The port finish adds dried fruit notes, vanilla sweetness, and subtle wine tannins that complement rather than overwhelm the bourbon base. You will taste caramel, maple, ripe fruit, and warming spices before a smooth, slightly sweet finish. The distinctive bottle with its curved shoulders and heavy glass signals premium positioning, and the liquid mostly delivers on that promise. Angel's Envy appeals to bourbon drinkers ready to explore beyond traditional profiles and to wine lovers curious about whiskey. It is approachable enough for newcomers, but interesting enough for experienced bourbon fans. The brand has grown rapidly, which sometimes raises quality concerns, but consistency has remained solid. This bourbon proves that innovation can work when executed thoughtfully by people who understand the tradition they are building upon. Number 4. Woodford Reserve. If bourbon wore a tuxedo, it would be Woodford Reserve. Born in Kentucky's limestone-rich hills, this small batch bourbon represents the polished, sophisticated side of Southern whiskey tradition. The heritage distillery and distinctive copper pot stills create bourbon meant for derby parties, cigar lounges, and upscale bars that want to showcase American craft. Take a sip and you will discover caramel, orange peel, dark chocolate, and roasted oak dancing in beautiful harmony. The mouthfeel is silky smooth, the finish long and warming. Nothing here feels experimental or aggressive. Instead, it's composed, balanced, and quietly confident. Woodford does not shout about quality. It simply speaks smoothly and expects you to listen. In your glass, it plays the perfect diplomat, elegant enough for serious whiskey enthusiasts, yet approachable enough for newcomers still developing their palate. Woodford's place in American drinking culture feels almost ceremonial. This is bourbon that reminds you good whiskey does not need gimmicks, just care, time, and patience. It is luxury that feels earned through craftsmanship, not manufactured through marketing. 3. Blanton's Single Barrel. That iconic bottle with the horse and jockey stopper is instantly recognizable, and what is inside lives up to the beautiful packaging. Blanton's pioneered the single-barrel bourbon category back in 1984, proving bourbon could be appreciated like fine wine, with bottle-to-bottle variation adding character rather than inconsistency. Each bottle comes from one specific barrel, hand-selected and bottled at its peak. You will find rich caramel, vanilla, honey, citrus, and baking spices with a smooth, complex finish. The flavor profile varies slightly between barrels, which is part of the appeal. Some lean sweeter, others show more oak or spice. But all maintain that signature Blanton's quality. The challenge is actually finding it. Blanton's has become a victim of its own success, with allocated distribution making bottles scarce, and secondary market prices inflated beyond reason. When you find it at retail, around $60, it is absolutely worth buying. At secondary prices, pushing $200, the value proposition disappears. Blanton's remains an excellent bourbon that proves single-barrel expressions offer something special worth seeking out. 2. Maker's Mark. That iconic red wax seal dripping down the bottleneck is recognizable from across any room. Maker's Mark isn't the most expensive bourbon or the rarest, but it might be the most beloved. Since 1953, it has stood for quality without pretension, the bourbon your father trusts, your date enjoys, and your bartender respects completely. The secret is the use of soft winter wheat instead of rye in the mash bill, which creates a distinctive round sweetness. You will taste caramel, vanilla, warm baking spices, and a smooth, buttery finish. Every bottle feels like a warm handshake from Kentucky itself, honest and easy to love. Maker's Mark built its legend through heart, not hype. The hand-dipped wax seal, handwritten labels, and the promise that every drop is crafted with genuine care all feel authentic rather than manufactured. Whether you drink it neat, on the rocks, or in an old-fashioned, it never disappoints. In a world obsessed with limited editions and impossible to find bottles, Maker's Mark remains the gold standard of accessible excellence. Number 1. Pappy Van Winkle's Family Reserve 15-Year. This is bourbon's holy grail, the bottle that launched 1,000 hunting trips and countless disappointments. Pappy Van Winkle represents everything bourbon can be when time, tradition, and obsessive attention to detail align perfectly. Aged 15 years in Kentucky's temperature extremes, this bourbon develops complexity that can't be rushed or faked. The first sip delivers caramel, vanilla, oak, dried fruit, leather, and warming spices in perfect harmony. The texture is silky, coating your mouth with rich flavor that evolves and lingers long after you swallow. There's a reason people camp outside liquor stores and enter countless lotteries hoping for a chance to buy a bottle. When bourbon reaches this level of refinement, it transcends being just whiskey and becomes an experience worth remembering. The problem is availability and price. Pappy's scarcity has created secondary market insanity, with bottles selling for thousands of dollars. At suggested retail around $150, it's worth every penny. At inflated secondary prices, you're paying for hype and bragging rights. If you ever find it at retail, buy it immediately.